I'm Jana Wong Healy, and I've been a film industry professional for years, having worked in development, production, and distribution for a variety of film studios and companies. I currently teach business communication at the University of Southern California's Marshall School of Business. I'm here with Stephen Gundel, a professor of film and television studies at the University of Warwick in the UK, a film historian, and an expert on Italian cinema. His latest book, Fame Amid the Ruins, Italian Film Stardom in the Age of Neorealism, is now published and available for purchase. Today, we're talking about performances and awards. Award season is upon us, and when actors, producers, and other creatives are nominated, they often say they don't care about winning, that being part of the film or being nominated is its own reward. So, Stephen, what do awards in general mean for a producer? Do they really matter? How much do they matter?
Well, I think sort of in recent decades, we've learned a lot more about how producers pursue awards, particularly perhaps in relation to the Oscars, where producers, production companies will have campaigns. They'll mobilize support for films, which is surely a clear indication that awards do matter. And I think they matter for a number of reasons. First of all, getting a nomination for an award puts a film in the public eye, or sometimes back in the public eye, because awards normally cover a 12-month period. So a film may have been released at the beginning and may have sort of almost slipped out of distribution for sure, perhaps even out of the popular imagination. So an award brings it back to the fore. It's a sort of marketing device. And obviously, if the awards are then received, clearly that is a suggestion, an indication that a film is good, that it's got a variety of qualities that mean the public should go and see it. So perhaps somebody will go and see it a second time, or somebody who missed it first time round would seek it out. So there's a strong marketing element here, because immediately the awards given will appear in advertising and so on, to add allure to a film. As far as acting awards are concerned, I think there's a matter of artistic prestige. I think Best Picture, Best Director, these are important awards, but actors and acting awards tend to sort of suggest a cultural quality or an artistic dimension. If you've got a particularly bravura performance from an actor, or indeed there's a tribute perhaps to an actor who's performed well in many films over a period of time, it sort of adds kudos to a film. And that kudos is also valuable to a producer, I think, in terms of having actors want to work with them or in their films in future, to showing that a producer is sort of sensitive to the needs and the talents of actors, and the importance of giving them appropriate platforms and so on.
So producers really sounds to me like they gain something from actor nominations, even though the nominations are not specifically for them.
I think so. I think often what happens is when you've got an award for best picture, a producer will be up there on stage. Not always. Sometimes it's just the director, but a producer will often want to be there on the stage as well as an awards ceremony. That is never the case, of course, with Best Actor awards. The producer stays in the background, but I think those awards are valuable to them for marketing and for the artistic kudos that accrues to a film. Because after all, one of the aspects of filmmaking that a producer is always concerned with is casting. And if a producer wins a good reputation with actors, it's no bad thing.
Dino's career has lasted for so many decades. What are the earliest acting awards that his films produced?
Well, I think if we, go back to his early days as a producer in Italy, working first of all with Lux Film, then in partnership with Carlo Ponti before going out on his own. I would say probably the first significant acting award that we can associate with Dino is for the 1946 film The Bandit. This was a film starring Anna Magnani, who had made her name with Rome Open City, but also the biggest Italian star of the fascist period, Amedeo Nazzari. And he won the award, the Silver Ribbon Award, which is an award that began that year, which is still awarded every year, a set of awards which are decided by Italian film critics. And Nazzari won that for his playing of a returning soldier who fails to sort of fit in. He finds his family's broken apart, and he gets drawn into organised crime and so on. And it really was a significant performance from an actor who had been associated with military films of the fascist period. Now, we know that Dino went to considerable lengths to persuade the director of that film, Alberto Lattuada, to cast Nazzari, who some people felt, maybe perhaps should be pushed into this to the side, given the change of regime, and the return of democracy and so on. But Dino was convinced of his popularity, that he was still somebody who had a capacity to draw audiences, and insisted on his being cast in that film. So I think we can say, although Dino had very little indeed to do with the specific performance, he was absolutely crucial to getting Nazzari cast in that role, which proved important for him in building a post-war career.
One of Dino's earliest successful films was Nights of Cabiria. Did that result in any special awards that he found to make him so proud in that film?
Well, Dino always had, he had certainly in the Italian part of his career, in those post-war years, he operated at two levels, as many production companies and producers did. There was the popular entertainment, and then there was the artistic level. And there were a number of prominent directors in the immediate post-war years, then several others who emerged and became names in the 1950s. And probably the best known of those new names was Federico Fellini. Now, Fellini won a number of Oscars for Best Foreign Film, including La Strada. And Nights of Cabiria was the film that he made just before La Dolce Vita. So it's a film from 1957, which is, set in Rome. It's largely centered on the figure of a happy-go-lucky prostitute played by Giulietta Mazzina, Fellini's wife, in fact. Now, she had played in La Strada. She was a well-known actress, completely different from this sort of the stars who'd emerged in Italian cinema in the early 50s, like Sophia Loren, Gina Lollobrigida. Giulietta Mazzini was a sort of elfin figure, and in fact she plays in La Strada this sort of androgynous, almost clownish figure. In Nights of Cabiria, she's a prostitute who never seems to find any clients, but she's out on the street, and it's Roman nightlife is there that will be developed further in La Dolce Vita. So she certainly did win awards. She won the Best Actress Award at Cannes for Nights of Cabiria, and I think that film is probably regarded as among a handful of highlights of her career. I think if we look more widely at Dino's films from the later 50s, we can see that there are a couple of films. There's War and Peace, for example, which won a Golden Globe Award for Best Supporting Actor. But more importantly, probably The Great War, an Italian film about the First World War, which we've talked about before, which was regarded as extremely important in bringing a critical attitude, let's say, to an episode. That's to say, the defeat of the Battle of Caporetto, which was regarded as a national humiliation in Italy, and the film's treatment of that episode was controversial. But it brought to the fore two actors, Vittorio Gassman, a stage actor who'd done drama, done comedy, other things, with Alberto Sordi, a well-known comic actor, and they proved to be extremely successful together, and they won awards. The film won the Oscar for best, was nominated rather for best foreign film that year. Gassman and Sordi won the best prize at the Venice Film Festival, which they shared, and they also both won the David of Donatello. Now, the David of Donatello is an Italian award system, which is the equivalent to the Oscars awarded by the Italian Cinema Academy, every year from 1956. So the Donatellos are the Italian Oscars, and those two actors, Gassman and Sordi, shared the awards for that film. And I think Dino was absolutely crucial in bringing those two actors together and persuading them to shape their roles in a particular way. And in fact, from that very year, 1959, there is, it's on the web channel of the Italian state broadcaster RAI, there's an episode from a program in which Dino De Laurentiis encounters one of the leading Italian print journalists of the time, Indra Montanelli, and breaks off from the conversation they're having in a series of sketches with actors in which he persuades actors to do things that they didn't want to do. For example, the actress Carla Gravina, he persuades her to have her head shaved. She doesn't want to do it, but he says, oh, it's in, the best interests of art and so on. And Alberto Sordi, this very, prominent Italian comic actor, says, I can't dance. I refuse to dance in a film. And he, Dino persuades him, doesn't get anywhere until he says, well, if you don't do it, I'll ask Vittorio Gassman to do it. At that point, he says, oh, right, okay. What we can see in this rather sort of, humorous and staged television episode is Dino engaging with actors, coaxing them to do things that they don't necessarily want to do or don't feel capable of doing for films by a mixture of, persuasion, flattery, and threats. And I think it offers us an insight into the way in which he operated. He was absolutely crucial for casting, in persuading actors to do things, convincing them it would be good for their career, perhaps even promising them future work if they went in the direction he was asking them to.
A few episodes ago we were talking about actors and their performances, and we learned a lot about Dino's wife Silvana Magano. She began as a starlet. She was like a former beauty contest winner. And then she appeared in Bitter Rice. So was Dino responsible for kickstarting her career? And we know from the podcast before that he really tried hard to keep her in the limelight for a very long time. But did he kickstart her career?
I think, this is in some ways quite a controversial issue because Silvana Mangano began in popular cinema and then, worked more and more regularly, insofar as one can say she worked regularly because she wasn't an actress who made a huge number of films, but she preferred to work with the art house directors. That's to say Visconti, Pasolini, and others. And it's often been seen by critics as this was her taking her distance from Dino. And in fact, although the couple had 4 children together, their relations did become strained and the marriage ended in divorce. I think if we look at the 1950s and into the 60s as well, I think we can see, though, that Dino had a huge role in shaping Silvana Mangano's screen career, but also her screen persona, which changed from being the vivacious starlet of Bitter Eyes to being a rather aloof and elegant, almost aristocratic type of woman later. And she changed physically. I mean, she was saying, generous, overweight, perhaps one might say, according to contemporary standards in her early films. And she gradually sort of slimmed down and adopted this sort of slightly ethereal, elongated, almost model-like figure. Now, if we say, her shift from somebody who had no formal training to being an actor who was respected, how did that happen? Well, clearly the great directors played their part, but so too did Dino. I mean, if we look at, say, the British Film Institute has a website in which they identify the key moments of some actors. Now, the key moment for Silvana Mangano is an episode of a film called The Gold of Naples. It's a series of episodes, 5 in all, I think, which are all in Naples. It's a film from 1955. It's one of the first films in which Silvana Mangano acted with her own voice. It was very common for these untrained actors in the post-war years in Italy simply to be dubbed by professionals, because although they could move, they could occupy the screen sort of physically, they didn't have the necessary ability or clarity of diction, right sort of voice to be able to perform with their voices. So they were dubbed by others. Now, in this particular episode of The Gold of Naples, which is called Teresa, Silvana Mangano plays the part of a prostitute who marries a man who she discovers has married her as an act of penitence for earlier misdeeds. So although she thinks, finally, this is her chance to, escape from the world of prostitution, she realizes actually she's been sort of drawn into a psychological drama almost that is not of her making. So there is a moment where she is on the street at night, having abandoned the marital home, and she's deciding what to do, and she has this sort of monologue in the dark under the rain and so on, and it's really extraordinary. And that was the first time really that she showed her talent as an actress. And we know Dino was absolutely central in making sure that episode was as perfect as possible. He wasn't happy with the ending. He sent the director back to reshoot the ending, to make sure that it really was a bravura moment for Silvana. So I think we can say, to sum up, yes, that he was crucial in developing her, in helping her change, in helping her to emerge, and helping her to win recognition as an actress.
Any other actors from that time period of his early producing career that he helped develop?
Well, I think if we look at the Italian period, we've mentioned Alberto Sordi already. I think he was under contract to Dino for a period, and I think he was an actor who had a very long career, dating back to the 1930s in radio, and which continued into the 1980s. Hugely sort of respected and loved figure in Italy. But I think if we look at, some of his best performances, they are the films that were produced by Dino. So I think we can say that he had a role in turning Sordi from somebody who could, on occasion, become rather mannered into a sort of a more rounded performer. I don't think anybody would want to give Dino the greatest credit for Sordi's success, but a contribution to that, I think, is undeniable.
Okay, so Dino moves from Italy to America. What happens with his American films and the actors? I know that one of his early films was Serpico, and I believe Al Pacino won a nomination, an Oscar nomination, for his role as Serpico. Are there any others that he helped foster and develop?
Well, Serpico, which we've talked about before, is a very important film in terms of establishing Dino's credibility in the American industry. And I think it was also an important film for Al Pacino, emerging from The Godfather and other films. I mean, he won a number of awards. He won a Golden Globes, he won a BAFTA, which is the British Oscar, if you like. He won a David of Donatello for Best Foreign Actor. So, there's a whole series of nominations and awards that he won for that. And that really helped, I think, Dino's reputation. If we sort of look more widely at his American films, we've talked about, Jessica Lange in King Kong. I mean, she won the Golden Globe for best newcomer for that film. I think probably there are two films though which we need to talk about. One is Ragtime. I mean, Ragtime was 1981 film based on the hugely successful novel by E.L. Doctorow. I think it really was an actor's film. Enormous cast, including some people making their last performances on screen. Jimmy Cagney was one, but also Pat O'Brien, and a series of other people who were making their first appearance on screen. A lot of people getting their break in that. This sort of period drama set in early 20th century New York. So if we look at the awards, I mean, Best Supporting Actress, for example, went that year to Elizabeth McGovern. There was a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress, went to Mary Steenburgen. So there's quite a lot of recognition came to that film, and I think we can say, it was a film that Dino believed in. As so often in this case, he loved the book, bought up the rights straight away, and engaged Milos Forman to make the film. But it's a film sort of showcase. I don't think it's always true of sort of these large projects with very large casts that they actually allow actors to shine. But this one did, and the fact that you've got a series, I mean. And Howard Rollins Jr. also won some awards. So we've got a range of awards, a range of sort of situations in that film which allowed actors to blossom. I think that's one. I mean, the other important film from the 80s is Year of the Dragon. Now, Year of the Dragon is I think a film that always divided people. And you look on Rotten Tomatoes today, and you can see some people love it, some people hated it. And this was a film, a sort of gangster movie set again, New York film set in Chinatown largely, directed by Michael Cimino, who had come to prominence with The Deer Hunter, but then was associated with that absolute disaster that was. Heaven's Gate, reevaluated by some later, but at the time seen as, a huge disaster. Year of the Dragon brought him back to the fore. And that although the film is controversial, really hated by some people, it did bring a number of names to the fore. Mickey Rourke, for example, there's probably, one of two or three films that he's associated with in the public mind, but it also won John Lone, who played the leading gangster in the film. He won a nomination for Best Supporting Actor, won a Golden Globe. So there are a number of awards associated with that. But I think it's probably true to say, though, that if we look at Dino's American career, it's marked by other values and other qualities. It's apart from Serpico, which really sort of stands out and was so important to the beginning of his American career, I think we have to say that actors and their performances was much less important in terms of Dino's project for cinema than it was in the Italian phase.
So would it be fair to say that there was a shift in his producing style and that he was going more for spectacle than performance in the American films that he produced, as opposed to the smaller, almost more artful, independent style films he produced in Italy?
It does look like that. I must say, I mean, when a film, and many of Dino's films from the American period were, not all of them by any means, but many of them were large budget spectacles. They required an awful lot of work to put together. They weren't sort of simple films to assemble, to bring to fruition. And casting was always important. But there's very little evidence that Dino was actively involved with shaping actors, developing them in the same way that he was in the let's say simpler Italian phase. I think, if we look at many of Dino's films, the qualities that were emphasized in selling to the public were not actorial ones, shall we say. They're sort of the theme of the film, or notoriously with King Kong, the ape. So it was the scale of the film, I think, more than the performances, became the key selling point.
This is a very fascinating discussion about actors and awards and Dino's career as they collided. So is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about actors and awards in Dino's career?
Well, I think we have to, I think when we think about film producers and we think of a producer like Dino was, as we've said before, was a producer who relied a lot on human contact, on warmth. He invited people into his home, he cooked for them, he befriended them. And this was a method that he adopted, in the Italian context, it came over as very Neapolitan. For example, that television episode from 1959, which I described to you, where he meets this journalist, Indro Montanelli. He's got his hands all over him. He's grasping his arm, touching him. He's a very touchy-feely sort of person. And I think he always used his personal charm to operate, whether he was trying to broker a financial deal, whether he was trying to win over a director, secure the rights for a book, persuade an actor to do something that they didn't perhaps see as being desirable. So I think he's always working in this sort of way. But I do think that ultimately, every film that Dino made, almost every film anyway, was actually larger than the actors who featured in it. I think he's always got his mind on the project, on the content, the theme. Will this go over with the audience? Will the audience buy it? And the theme comes first, and then the casting and the actors afterwards.
Well, thank you, Stephen, and we'll catch you again next time.
Thank you, Jana.